So it's called TBD, and I found it yesterday in the train that I didn't name my talk, and it went online to TBD, and it was also yesterday. So the last task I had on my talk was to find a nice name. So I'm going to talk about the transitions. So logically the T will be transition, and there was a B and D, and Stefan came with a great idea to be called like transition by design, and I had a second idea which was like transition be delicious. So hopefully it will be like a very delicious talk and you will learn something. I will show you some code, and let's start because I don't have so much time as I usually used to have. So this is me, and I'm going to just quick jump over, but I'm like a big fan of Star Wars. You can talk about that, and that's why I'm a front-end knight. So we are talking today about the transitions and animations, and the best way to show the transitions is not talk about it, but show them. Really, like, why should I talk only about if I can show you some real project? So this is a project which I created few years ago already, and it's not created with vue.js, and also not with Angular, and also not with React. Basically, this is built on the Vanilla.js library called smooth.js, and the point why I'm showing this project, it's there is this nice transition between the pages, and the whole project have a small animations, and you can like click through it, and if you go to the next project, then everything moves to the left side, and it's nice. But there is a small problem with this project, which is everything you saw, it's basically everything, but there's no more. And it took me like 170 hours to create that. And there is no CMS behind anything, so it's crazy. But nowadays, we have a Nuxt, for example, and Next also, and we can create pages like this, with a culture page, and every agency needs a culture page. And this is the last page I created in the company where I was working. I make it a little bit smaller, sorry. And basically the pages like this have the same idea. You are scrolling through the page, and if you are scrolling, you are changing the pages. The URL is changing, but there is no hard jump between the pages. And the transition is always that the next page is coming, or the next chapter is coming from the bottom. So if I open the navigation and click on the contact, it's coming from the bottom. Yeah, a little bit slow. And if I go back, it's something you cannot see. I will show you here. If the second chapter, I jump over, and it's coming from bottom. So these transitions are something I am going to show you how to do it. And what is my point is it's very, very easy. So we should really do it maybe sometimes often, but like really important notice, this is not something you will do for the newspapers or like government pages. Yeah, use that time for something better, like accessibility and other stuff. So just to be sure. So what you need to do is first you have to understand the basic and the theory. And the basic and the theory is not the JavaScript in this case, but it's a CSS3 transition and animations. I'm not going to talk about those, but you should just open the MDN and just learn a little bit about them. But it's very easy, and you can create beautiful stuff only with the CSS. And then there is something I'm going to talk about the Vue.js, but the same thing we could do in the React. But the Vue.js have a great documentation. And my point was like, why should I copy all that nice facts to my presentation if I can show you it in the documentation, and next time if you need to do something, you have to look into documentation. So, that was too loud. And the Vue.js is have something called transition wrapper component, which is pretty nice name. And the point is that you can wrap all your components and elements into a component called transition. And this is a sample of it. So you have a template, and in a template, you just called a component called transition. You will name your transition, or in this name will be its fate. And then you put inside an element or component. In this case, we are like switching true false on the show, and if this condition is true, then it will be shown, and if not, then it will be hidden. Then you have a data, this very simple thing, and then you have a few lines of the CSS. And basically, with these few lines of code I just showed you, you can just toggle something like a hero. Hello, it's fading out and fading in. So what is happening here is that Vue.js is adding the 6 classes. And the Vue.js know about your CSS, so if you like define the duration, it will be get it, and also the whole transition. You don't have to do like nothing in JavaScript, you just write the CSS. And then at the beginning of of the whole transition duration will be added the class enter. So it will, in our case, it was a fade enter, or that's the from, so basically the initial state of the transition. Then there is the enter active and enter to. And the best way to explain it is this diagram, where you can see that during the whole time of the transition will be active the class enter active, logically, and then at the beginning it will be enter, and we are entering where to. It will be, in this case, fade enter to. The same approach is created for the leave. So in our sample up there, we just entering from the opacity 0, and after the first tick or the first few milliseconds, we just remove this class, and as the default opacity is 1, we are going to 1. So that's it. Okay. The same thing we can use. We have the same setup now. And now I'm only going to change the CSS, or in the documentation is change it of the CSS, and then you can create something like this. So basically, I am just playing with the transform, and also I'm a little bit playing with the timing of the transition from the entering and leaving. And then I create 2 different transitions for the same event. This is pretty simple stuff, but this is the basic that we have to understand for the transitions of the pages. The same thing, you could use also the keyframes from the CSS, etc., or create the JavaScript hooks. But there is one but, and that we can also translate or animate, create transition between the elements or components. So in this case, I've wrapped, or in the documentation is wrapped in the transition wrapper component, a table and also a p tag. And if you see there is a condition, if there are items in table, then it will be show table. And if there are no items, it will be show paragraph. And we can, the funny thing about the Vue.js is that we can create the transition between these 2 elements. But in real time, only one of these elements should be shown. So not that both of them. Then we get an error from the Vue.js. And the thing is like how we are going to do it. So we are applying the leaving classes and we are applying the entering classes. But there is one thing that you should understand, and there is a mode. Because we are going to apply the leaving classing, but the question is when, and also the question is when we are going to apply the entering classing. If we don't specify the mode, which is here, then we will get something like this. As you can see, in the same time, the one button, there are like 2 buttons. One button is leaving the screen or fading out, and another button is entering the screen, so entering in. I call it like this is undefined mode, basically. And then we have 2 more modes, and this is in-out and out-in. If we go to out-in, which is here, then at first we leave the screen, and there is for really little time there is nothing on the screen basically. So the component is leaving, fading out, and then it's switched and added the new component, and that's entering. If we do the in-out, then at first the component is entering the screen, and then after the enter is done, the leaving is happening. So you can see it here. At first the button came to screen, and then the second button or the original button left. Okay, now we understand the basics from the Vue.js. So let's move to the nuxt.js, because this is maybe a Jamstack session, but we probably could call it also nuxt.js session, as I look on it. So there is a thing that the guys who build the nuxt.js did, and they use the transition from the Vue.js, which is pretty cool, because they already set up transitions for you in the pages with the default setup. So if you want to have a transition in nuxt.js for your pages, you don't have to write any JavaScript and any HTML to that. You just have to use a default setup and just write the CSS for it. In this case, the default setup is that the v in this v enter will be page. So in our case, it will be page enter, page leave, etc. And the mode is out in. But you can override it in the Nuxt config or even on the level of each page. The one very important thing, and trick, is that in the Nuxt.js introduces also layout. So if you are like navigating between pages which have different layouts, then the transition between pages is not happening because you are changing the layout, which are the wrappers for the pages. This is logical, so we also have to create a transition for the layouts. That's it. So, okay, that was the theory, and let's move to the, of course. So let's move to the experiment. I created an edit code sandbox for you, and you can check it later. But if I go now to localhost, there should run my code. So there's a page, which I do a little bit smaller, it will be better. Cool. And then you can navigate. If I click on the first, I'm going to the first page, and then I go to the next page, the second, and the page is coming from the bottom always. So how to do this? Let's see some code. This is the first page, and if you look into this view, there is nothing special, and even the script. This is everything I wrote. So how I did it? In the nuxt config, I overrided the default settings for the page transitions, and I named it default, and the mode is an empty string, undefined, and I'm not sure how I should call this. So there is not a defined mode. So this is the nuxt config, and then I created a transition page, SCSS or CSS file, where I write these 22 lines of code. And these 22 lines of code is everything you need to create that transition I just showed you. So here you can see that it's 800 milliseconds, and basically we are changing opacity and the transform, and of course the page which will be entering the screen at first will be positioned fixed, and we will position under the screen, so under default you don't see it. And then it will enter basically to the screen, so it will be like it should be normally. But it's fixed because we are overlapping those two pages. And the page which is leaving is doing nothing else, just leaving to the opacity 0.2, and it's moving 800% of the height of the screen, so it's a little bit slower. I can prove it, as I did it, as you can see there. I just did, it's 8,000 milliseconds or 8 seconds, and now we could see the transition very slow in slow motion. And I will also show you what is happening in the inspector. Oh, now this. So, okay. Let's click on the first. And now you can see that the page which is entering is a little bit faster as the page which is leaving, and that's it. But that's it, yeah, easy, sorry. But, wait for it. If you look into the main, I have one main. It's big enough? Yeah, I think it's okay. So if I click on the next page, there will be two mains. On one main will be applied the leaving classes, and the new one will be applied the entering classes. And this is the whole trick. So I did the whole thing only with the CSS. Nothing complicated, and the mode is, in this case, is not defined. So in the same time are applied the classes. If I change the mode in the nuxt config to out in, and hopefully everything is running good, then we should see that at first the page will leave, and then will be a blank page, so white screen, and then the second page we start entering. So now no page is entering, and also here, if I show you really fast, there is only one main, and then now the page left, and we switch the main. So there are no two mains anymore, because we don't need them. If we change it to in-out, then exactly what will happen is probably everybody knows. At first the page which should enter, the new page should enter from the bottom, and there will be two mains, but only on one main will be applied the transition classes. So at first will be applied the entering classes, and if it's the entering done, then it will be applied the leaving classes. So let's go. See, this is the entering, and there is nothing. And if this is done, then we will see a broken layout and the leaving classes. We can fix this, but that's not the point of this talk. Okay, change it back to the 8,800 milliseconds. So this is a big question. If you see, I click back home. I'm going to intro page, and what happened is a different animation, but I defined the default animation as this coming from the bottom. So to create this, it's pretty easy. Just open the intro page or a special page where you want, and override your default. And in this case, I'm creating that the screen is filled with the black rectangles. That means that I don't have to need two mains in the same time in my HTML code. So all I do is another CSS. So this is 100, so like 50 lines of code, which it could be much better. And I'm just using before and after. And these two rectangles basically have a little bit delay between each other. And then we will fill the screen. So do it really fast. Hopefully it will work. No, it's still cached. So now see, it's coming into the screen, and there is only one main. And now as the screen is filled with the black, we switch the mains. The new page is now there, but the new page, the entering, is that the rectangles are already filled, and we just animate them away. So the whole magic behind color time. Okay. So, but this was still, I was talking something about the layouts, and what was there? Let's look here. Something about the let's say you want to have a preloader transition, that you have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 100, and then you will go to the page. So the question is here, if you look on this, then what is happening in my project is like we are loading something. This is Faker. And after 100%, we are entering the intro, but no animation happens. And the question is why? And the answer is like we change the layout, because I have one layout for the preloader, and in this thing I would like to have a different animation from the entering the intro. And I could do it with a very kind of use a store and check from which paging I'm entering the page, and then change it with the JavaScript. But also what you can do is you like create a different layout, and then you create a layout transition. So in this case I just enable it to prove that I'm changing the layouts. So after reload, it should happen that after 100% there will be animation or transition, or how we call it. And now if we go into page with a different layout, always will be used this transition. So now let's go back, and you see this is happening. Back home. Okay. That was the basics, and I think like you can also imagine like you can do a lot of interesting stuff with this. But it's kind of boring because you probably already see it somewhere and you have idea how to do it. So what if I would do something interesting like float the screen, or like little bit water? So something like this, that we will fill the screen with the water, and then suddenly there is a new URL, a new page, and you can like use this with provide some useful information for your user. So if you just go somewhere, there's like some numbers, or I don't know. How to create an animation like this. And I will tell you it's very easy, because there is something called Lottie, and if you already heard about Lottie, then you know where I am heading. So on the water page, I have a component which is called page water transition. That's it, there is nothing else, just regular page. So what is doing this component is that basically I am including a Lottie file, a Lottie component, and the Lottie component, oh come on, is something which is called Lottie web, and it's a vanilla JavaScript. NPM package you can install, and then you can load the animation from a JSON file which was created in After Effects, and you provide some inputs, like it should be looped, autoplayed, that's up to you, and then you can play with your animation. Here I'm providing a JSON file which is loaded from my assets as a JSON, and then I created this animation. So if I remove the water and move this to 20, you should see the animation. This is the animation, and this animation I get it directly from the lottiefiles.com. So this is the file, or like the animation. You can download it as JSON, and this is something which your designer, if you have your own designer, it's cool to have your own designer, create, and directly in After Effects can like generate JSON, and you directly use something they created. You just don't have to code it at all. This is the coolest thing about that. So after that, you just can create animations like this with a little bit of CSS, of course. I'm not going to explain the CSS because I hope you can write, all of you can do it. So if you look here, it's like 29 lines of code, which is like doing anything else, like moving this water up and down. Okay, so that was the water. So let's have some more funny idea. So I have the idea to create like, okay, what could I do? I find the animations of the bikers. give me a second. Yeah, this biker. So I was like, okay, and I know that this animation is looping, and I can use it to like maybe for Olympic course, like Olympic games. So I created something which is okay. Give me a second to remove this. And okay, back home. So let's do something like this. Okay, how it is done? Even this is the same principle, but as I said, this is a JSON file which generates SVG, and the JavaScript is done animating or like changing the SVG, and it looks like it's animating or moving or whatever. So I have page bikers transition, which is the same principle as was the water. And if I move now this 120 to a 50 and change the scale 1 because I want to see it, then I can show you that, okay, this is basically the same animation. But there are like different colors. So let's check the HTML. So HTML is that there is SVG. Okay, so if it's the SVG, I can change the color. Or so let's check the CSS. And there is this code, which is basically saying that all paths which are filled with this nice RGB should be a current color. So if I remove it, and now suddenly I have all the blue bikers. And this is like, for me, this is only type of the iceberg you can play because it's SVG. You have functions like reverse, like stove animation, make it faster, or move it to left, right. You can create a game with this. So, okay, that was the transition. And second, I will do this. Wait, it will be faster. Discord changes. And then I have the last thing which I wanted to show you, and that's we are on the Jamstack, and I didn't show you anything about the Jamstack, but I was the whole time telling you that this is a JSON files. So why don't create something more dynamic? Like, let's say that you send an email or something, and you have like success message. So I had this green check mark, but then customers say like, you know, I would like to change something, like change the animation. And I was like, okay, so let's try to have a Storyblok set up for this. So I created basic Storyblok space, and there's the settings where I uploaded my JSON file. So if I want to change it and a little bit play with this, I can go to the assets, look for my animations, and let's change it to orange, which is basically this animation. So I get the JSON of this. I'm going here, replace this, and save it. And now, if we go to dynamic page, we should get the orange thing. Okay, you have a function, so we can make it faster. Let's do it super fast, like 5. And let's loop it, because it's just a JavaScript where we get all this information. So if I go back home, and now I click to dynamic, it's it's experiments. But the point is like you can play with it, and you can create something like, I don't know, like let's say that I'm thirsty, so, and we are going to get all the drinks today. So let's use this transition, and this will be almost the end of my talk. So back home, and then we should choose our own drink that we would like to have. So, okay, so that was it, and there are still 2 slides. Because I would like to talk about Lottie, because that was my reaction as I found about Lottie like 1.5 years ago, and I thought like, oh, it's not working. Okay, the internet. And this was my reaction after I understand what really we can do all with it. Because there was a video, like designers are using After Effects. They are creating a web transitions, like the element transitions, and they are using all this stuff and then giving you, or me usually, a video of something I should code. And now we had some situation that we had a meetup. There was like rectangles moving with some numbers, with some dates, etc., to inviting to our meetup. And what we did is basically generated a video from it, then upload it to the YouTube, then it was like few megabytes, then you have to put it on somewhere on a page, you have a problem with the scaling and everything that. Okay, and I said like, hey guys, could you please export it with a body moving plugin as a Lottie file? I would love to try it as a SVG, like animation. And they did that. And then suddenly it was like, I think about like 120, 150 kilobytes file, which was loaded, and it was working basically, I think, in Internet Explorer 10. And it was scaling because it's SVG. You can change the colors, you can play with that. So that's great. So that's why I'm also saying, like, if you want to make a photo from this talk, take the photo of this link, and you can find this, basically the whole tutorial how to do it. It's very easy. And then you can find a very interesting link here, which is Haiku. It's also, if you don't like the After Effects, you can create these files also with the Haiku. And then there is Lottie files, which is, I don't know, it's like GitHub for the animators, or guys who are creating those funny animations, and you can already find a lot of animations which are for free. And should I stop? So, and then it's already used. It's a cross-platform, so it doesn't matter. If you want to do it with vanilla JavaScript, it works. And just find here somebody they surely create some animations for you if you want. And I think that was my last slide. So thank you very much, and I hope that you will use it soon and make the web a little bit more beautiful place.